we look at Heisman Trophy odds. Obviously, this is the most bet upon of all awards here. And Heisman Trophy, we are staring down the barrel of will Caleb Williams, the headline here, will Caleb Williams become the first back-to-back winner since Archie Griffin in the mid-'70s? Archie Griffin, who was running back for Ohio State. The only other time was back-to-back. Caleb Williams, who won the Heisman last year. I know, yes, I had the Max Duggan one, but didn't quite get there at 100-1. Caleb Williams deserved it, no question about it. He's the only one in single digits here. He's plus 550 to become the back-to-back winner. Now, let me just say before we move on to anybody else, when we talk about awards in other sports, let's talk baseball. You know, what's the big thing with those baseball writers who vote on Hall of Fame? Well, they don't want to let anybody in the first ballot, right? They want that to be a sacred thing. They are very self-important. They believe themselves to be very highbrow stewards of this amazing institution. Of course, they don't have Barry Bonds in there, so they can go to hell. But that's a different story. But they really feel big about the first ballot stuff, right? So it's an institution that they deem so close to their hearts, and so they vote accordingly with certain subjective elements in there. I'm trying to think of like another sport. We talked about when we talk about like, the Nikola Jokic thing is the most recent example, right? That maybe some of those NBA voters, maybe, we're speculating, we don't know, but maybe some of them were like, you know what, we don't want him to be on the short list, pardon me, of back-to-back-to-back MVP winners, a la Larry Joe Bird, Bill Russell, and who was the third on that as well? I can't remember now. But anyway, it's only 3 all time, and that was, I want to say it was Wilt. Those are the only 3 that did it before. We don't want Nikola Jokic to be there, and so he wasn't voted in. Whether you believe that or not, it's possible, and certainly was incumbent upon us to bring that up. Yes, it was Wilt Chamberlain, the other 3-time back-to-back-to-back. I don't think this exists is where I'm getting at with college football because, Kelley, there are roughly 5 bajillion Heisman voters.
Yep.
And so
some of whom that don't even work in the sport anymore or in sports.
Yeah.
Because I know some.
And I know some who don't have a Heisman vote who you'd be like, well, how do you not have a Heisman vote?
Who did we just, was it Felica?
Felica doesn't have a Heisman vote.
Chris the Bear Felica doesn't have a Heisman vote.
It's unbelievable. So do I think that same sort of mentality that I just described in baseball betting and in basketball betting will exist here? I don't. So I think Caleb Williams is a justified plus 550 favorite without the layer of, but we don't want anybody to have it back-to-back like Archie Griffin did. And if you believe that USC is going to get to the playoff this year, which I actually do, I think that's obviously the correct play. Now, does this mean that there isn't a bet to be made elsewhere? Because, as you can see, after Caleb Williams, including Caleb Williams, it is nothing but a quarterback parade. The reason that it is a quarterback parade, by the way, the first non-quarterback on this list, I'm thinking, is Marvin Harrison Jr. Am I seeing that right? At 20-1? So that's the thing. So the reason for that is a non-quarterback, if we look at Heisman history, a non-quarterback who has won the Heisman, it basically happens, Kelley, roughly every 5 years. So the last non-quarterback to win the Heisman was Devontae Smith, 2020. Before that, Derrick Henry, 2015. Before that, Mark Ingram, 2009. Before that, Reggie Bush, 2005. Who could forget that? And those are all since the year 2000. That's it. That's the list of non-quarterbacks. So after Caleb Williams, it's Jaden Daniels of LSU at 12-1, Quinn Ewers at Texas at 12-1, Cade Klubnik at Clemson at 14-1, and your guy, Jordan Travis, Kelley, at your alma mater, Florida State at 14-1. Drake May, who's getting a lot of love, is at 16-1. And Bo Nix, it should be mentioned, in his 17th year of college football, also at 16-1. You have a bet, don't you?
I do have a bet in this market. I know this is going to...
Let me guess.
Yeah, not going to surprise anybody. What you got, Gill? What's my bet?
Jordan Travis.
That's right. Ding,
Homer.
ding, 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 ding.
He's awesome, by the way.
I think the other thing worth pointing out in this market this year, it is fascinating, and I'm interested to see if voters, I think your Jokic comparison was interesting, and it might translate over this year to the Heisman market of, okay, you're talking about a year where you don't have the guy at in Alabama, right, at Clemson. Clemson, you have Klubnik coming back, but it's not like a guy who's done a ton there in the past. I think some of the schools that we look to right away, Georgia, right, a lot of these guys don't have returning quarterbacks that did big things in their career. Ohio State, right, same thing. You keep rolling down that list. Does it make it more likely that Caleb Williams wins this award? Maybe. And maybe there is some sentimental, like, hey, USC hasn't been in the big picture in a while. Like, let's go back out west and give the Heisman there. Maybe, but we also know how much there is an East Coast bias, and there is East Coast voters out there that aren't going to see as many of his games. So I think that's interesting. My point of saying that is I think some of these longer shots, there might actually be some value in this year. If they have big seasons, I think Caleb Williams might be a little bit too short here. The one that is interesting is Drake May, where his odds have kind of drifted a bit. I think where some of these other guys have gotten bet up, his have drifted a little bit, which is interesting to me. I like Jordan Travis, though, as far as what you're talking about teams that are expected to do well this year and returning a talented, experienced quarterback. There's few on this list, and he's one of them that checks those boxes. So for a Florida State team whose toughest games are LSU to start the year, and that will be a tough game. LSU to start the year, but then at Clemson, you're talking, you win those couple games, Florida State's real live to possibly have an undefeated season this year. So, yeah, I took a bit of him. I think it was 15-1 I got him at. But, yeah, a little small way for me to bet on Florida State this year.
Well, I think there's some correlation to what you're just saying. If you think FSU could get to the playoff, yes, then that makes a lot of sense. Let me talk about some other people, though.
And I think that applies to all three of the big ACC quarterbacks, right? Like, if you think that about Klubnik, if you think that about Drake May, same thing. You're probably betting this.
Kyle McCord, new at Ohio State. What can you expect of him? No one really knows. I mean, if he can even approach what C.J. Stroud did, it's going to be awesome. But Heisman, I guess we don't know. He certainly has the receivers, right, to be as successful as possible. Do you want to take a flyer on that sight unseen, though, as the main guy for a whole season? I don't know that you do. Drew Aller at Penn State, a lot is expected of him, but again, what do you really know? The guy that sort of leaps off that second column, though, is Blake Corum of Michigan, 28-1. Yes, there is a Donovan Edwards, quote-unquote, problem when it comes to the Heisman, and some people think Donovan Edwards is actually the better pro prospect of the two Michigan backs. But Blake Corum, if we remember last year, he ends up missing basically like the last 3.5 games of that season. And he got hurt midway through that Illinois game. I mean, he could have been a super contender last year.
Yep.
So, I don't know, Blake Corum at 28-1 certainly has an interesting story based on what we saw of him last year. But again, does Donovan Edwards then break out 80-yard touchdown runs and you're like, well, they're just as good. Like Dr. Bob thinks Donovan Edwards is just as good as Blake Corum by his numbers. And Donovan Edwards kind of proved that over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I think I'd need longer odds on Corum.
Yeah, maybe so. But it is a name that deserves mention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was great last year, right, until he got hurt. Yeah. I think also McCarthy is interesting with them too, right? Does he have, when I was talking before about teams, right, that are good teams coming back with experienced quarterbacks, okay, he checks those boxes. But is it a team that's going to throw the ball enough, right, where he can rack up the stats to compare to what a Caleb Williams does?
Yeah, I mean, it really has to be correlated with how well you think the team's going. If you think FSU is getting to the playoff, Jordan Travis should trigger a wager. If you think USC is, don't think twice.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.